Right. Thank you, Chandra. All right. So what's all the fuss about DMARC, right? So DMARC, first of all, stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. It is a standard that came about in 2012 to protect against exact domain impersonations at a global level, right? Now, it is an effective method at that. This is a standard that relies on existing technologies like SPF and DKIM from an authentication perspective, right? But adds something called alignment. And what that is where the return path and the DKIM signing domain in the hidden headers of the message are of the same domain that is in the viewable part of the message, right? It also provides for that global visibility on who all is sending email as your domain, and a way to protect, and not just protect, but also enforce a policy against unauthorized senders and all the shadow IT that's being sent as your domain. So basically, again, it gives you the domain owner back control on who can send email as your domain in the wild. Okay. Now, if it's so effective, why haven't more organizations deployed DMARC? Well, honestly, a lot of them are just unaware of it, right? And that's why we're here today to kind of raise that awareness, right? Because it is an effective method to protect against exact domain impersonation. And not just that, but it should be a priority in your email security posture. But among the people that already have heard of DMARC, there are a lot of misconceptions and reasons why they haven't deployed DMARC. A lot of them think, hey, I'm already safe. I already have a secure email gateway that is enforcing DMARC. I already have a strong SPF and DKIM record. I am protected. That's actually a misconception. You are not protected from exact domain impersonations unless you have DMARC at enforcement. Second, some just think it's too scary. They're afraid of blocking some of their legitimate email, going to a policy of reject too quickly and blocking legitimate email sources and impacting the business, right? And third, a lot of them think it's just too much work. It's too hard. Have you guys seen what a DMARC report looks like? This is a sample DMARC report. It's an XML report that contains, IP address of where an email was sent from as your domain and some other additional metadata. But imagine receiving thousands of these a day and having to sift through them to make heads or tails of the data, to be able to authenticate, who's sending email as you and on all that through your journey to DMARC enforcement. I highly recommend using a solution that automatically ingests this data and gives you actionable intelligence, right? Things that you can take care of and do without having to sift through these scary XML reports. Okay. Now that you've seen what an XML reports look like, how do you enable DMARC? Well, DMARC is a simple text record that you add to your DNS, right? That tells all the receiving gateway that receive a message purporting to be from your domain what to do with that message. Now, the DMARC record has two primary elements. I mean, there's other elements, but the two main ones that you should care about are the reporting addresses, where those scary XML reports get sent to, and a policy that tells these receiving gateways what to do with messages that they receive purporting to be from your domain. Now, there's three policies that are possible with DMARC. One is none, quarantine, and reject. With none, you basically get the reporting. You find out, okay, all the messages that are being sent as you. With quarantine, any messages that fail authentication end up in the spam or junk box. With reject, which is the ultimate enforcement, messages that fail authentication will be outright rejected by the gateway. And by the way, you are not at DMARC enforcement unless you have a policy of quarantine or ultimately reject. So there's, again, a lot of misconceptions of, hey, I put a DMARC record with a policy of none, I'm protected. You're not. You got to get to quarantine and ultimately reject to be protected. Now, how does DMARC work? You've put in the record, you write enforcement. From a flow perspective, right? A message gets sent as your domain, right? From either a legitimate source that you're using or some potential bad actor out there that's impersonating your domain. That message gets received by the recipient's email server, right? So DMARC doesn't impact the basic email flow. There is no MX record changes to route emails through, right? Now, once that email, the recipient's email server receives that message, it does some DNS handshakes for DMARC, SPF, and DKIM against the sender's DNS server, right? And to authenticate that message. Now, based on those records and based on the authentication that the recipient's email server performs, the message, if it passes, ends up in the recipient's inbox. If it fails and your policy is quarantine, it ends up in the spam. If it fails and the policy is rejected, it ends up in the, it ends up being rejected outright by the gateway. So it doesn't end up in any kind of inbox. And then at the end of the day, that recipient's email server will send that scary XML report I showed you earlier to let the sender know that, yes, I've received a message purporting to be for you, as you from who and what happened to that message from a disposition perspective. Like, did it end up in the spam box or rejected, or did it end up in the inbox, right? So that's how it works, and it sounds easy, right? Doesn't it? Well, as organizations and companies try to deploy DMARC in a do-it-yourself kind of fashion, right? They run into a number of challenges. And most of these challenges kind of fall into three categories in general, right? Either technical complexities, tedious or time-consuming tasks, or just technical errors. And here are some of the common ones, right? The XML reports. Again, imagine having to sift through those and trying to make heads or tails of the data. And then properly identifying all the email streams that you're trying to authenticate, and then authenticating them via SPF and DKIM and all that, and identifying the internal owners as well that are using those. Also, there are a lot of global organizations have system complexities with regards to how they have their email set up. And imagine going to policy of reject and missing some of those internal email systems or email sources, and then blocking those critical emails, right? That's definite impact to the business that people don't want to kind of risk at that point. Also, as you're going through this journey of getting to DMARC enforcement, a lot of the changes that you're making are in your DNS, right? You're making SPF changes, DKIM, DMARC, all of that. All these DNS changes are, first of all, error prone, because you're copying, pasting, typos, things like that, that could cause either your authentication to start failing with regards to emails, SPF, DKIM, DMARC. But also, if you make critical errors, your whole DNS resolution will fail. And absolutely, from a business impact perspective, that's high up there. And then lastly, one of the most common reasons or issues that people run into as they're going through their DMARC journey is something called the 10 SPF lookup limit. So what is that? So when SPF came about 20 years ago or so, they put in a limit in there of 10 DNS lookups. They put that limit in there to protect against denial of service types attacks against the sender's DNS server. Now, a lot of companies, as they're implementing DMARC, to overcome this challenge, they start using bad techniques like subdomaining or IP flattening. There's inherent problems in those and major problems in those techniques because let's say you miss an IP, or the IPs that are that provider use changes, and again, you're impacting email deliverability. Email will fail to authenticate. Now, I highly recommend using a kind of a hosted solution like Redsift's, where it takes care and overcomes that challenge and all the other challenges that you guys are doing, that you guys might run into from a do-it-yourself perspective. Now, why should you do DMARC, right? Why should it become a priority in your organization? Well, first and foremost, the obvious thing, it protects against exact domain impersonation, right? Now, with the right solution, and that gives you kind of all the benefits of a DMARC, you can get also things like the global visibility on who all is sending email as your domain, a way to identify and stop all the shadow IT and unauthorized senders as your domain. Being at DMARC enforcement also improves your email deliverability, because what you've done is you've authenticated all your senders properly for SPF and DKIM, and hence giving them a better chance of ending up in the inbox, versus before, if they failed authentication, they could have ended up in the spam box of that user. And then also with DMARC and enforcement, your domain's reputation and your security score on sites like BitSite, security scorecards, and the such get better, because they typically, those sites, when they rate you, they typically ding you if your SPF and DMARC and DKIM are not set up properly. And by the way, this is something that in big organizations, CISOs absolutely look at, and they care about the most, being getting their security score at BitSite or security scorecard to improve and get higher. And now, and lastly, excuse me, one of the rewards and incentives that the industry puts out there to incentivize people to get to DMARC enforcement is something called BIMI. Simply put, it's a way to show your trademarked logo in the messages instead of showing your initials, right? And what we've seen that do is help with improving open rates, and not just that, but also brand recognition, right? Something that a marketing organization and your CMO might be very interested in, as again, it affects the bottom line from a business perspective. So hopefully we've kind of explained at a basic level kind of what DMARC is and why it should be a priority in your organization. And here at Redsift, we're here to help you guys implement DMARC, get you to DMARC at enforcement in the fastest and safest way possible. And now to some of your questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Issam. So if anybody else, I've answered some of them as we've gone along, but if you do have some additional questions, if you want to just go ahead and put them in the chat box. And some of these I've actually pulled aside. I didn't want to interrupt too much on the time, and so I've got them pulled aside. So I'm going to start with some of those for you, Issam. I have Martin is asking, what happens if you go over a 10 SPF lookup limit, and are you alerted?
All right, great question. Thank you. So with the 10 SPF lookup limit, if you go over that, emails will start failing SPF authentication, and that's not something that you want. Now, if you're doing it yourself, you'll not get alerted about it. DMARC, maybe 24 hours later after you get that XML report, will tell you, hey, that message coming out of a service that you're using, maybe your Office 365, failed authentication, and this is why it failed. So the alerting comes in 24 hours later. Now, if you're using a solution like Redsift and all that to monitor all this, you actually get alerted pretty quickly, real time, of any of those errors or changes that are happening in your environment, especially the 10 SPF lookup limit, because our solution takes care of that. So you'll never be or you'll never go over that limit with a hosted solution.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Isam. And then Tina's asking, how long does it take to implement a DMARC solution? And then she had a follow-up message. Once you do have a solution, how long does it take to get to policy of enforcement?
So implementing a solution is pretty easy. As you saw, you just put in that DMARC record to start getting the reporting, because the first step in this process is really understand the scope of the work, the problem that you have, the amount of email sources that you need to authenticate, and the bad actors that are potentially spoofing your domain. So once you start reporting, you report for a few weeks, and then as you're getting that reporting, you'll start going through the authentication process of SPF and DKIM for all the legitimate sources. Once you've authenticated all the sources that are legitimate, then you're ready to kind of start ratcheting up the enforcement policy. So you start with quarantine and you monitor things, and then ultimately you get all the way to reject. Now, if you're trying to do this yourself and you run into a lot of the challenges that I talked about, then basically that delays and derails that whole process, right? That's why using, again, a solution that helps you overcome all those challenges and get you to market enforcement in kind of the fastest and safest way possible. Now, do it yourself takes months with, or sometimes even years, what I've seen. With Redshift, we typically get you there within 4 to 8 weeks.
Perfect, thank you. And then Han just asked, does both SPF and DKIM alignment have to pass for DMARC? So I'm guessing for DMARC to be in place, the enforcement.
Great question, Han. So DMARC only requires one of those authentication methods to pass, right? So if SPF passes and it's aligned, right? Because that's key for DMARC, and DKIM fails, that message still passes DMARC. So it doesn't have to have both. Now, from a best practices perspective, as we're working with our customers, and what we tell our customers is that if a service supports both SPF and DKIM, make sure they're configured to authenticate properly and align properly for both. The reason we say that is it gives that message a higher chance of getting to the inbox, because if one fails and the other one passes, it makes it through, and the chance of both of them failing is lower, right? So you want to give it the best chance to get to the inbox. So from a best practice perspective, get them both implemented, but DMARC only requires one to pass.
Perfect, thank you. And then I have Faubert has just messaged in, how does this differ from my secure email gateway settings for SPF, DKIM, and TLS?
Okay, another great question. So as I mentioned earlier about why people don't implement DMARC, they think they're safe because they have an SCG. Now, all these settings from a secure email gateway perspective are only for inbound emails coming into your organization, right? DMARC as a whole is at a global level, protecting everybody in your email ecosystem, inbound, outbound, plus customers, partners, vendors that receive email from your domain. If you're at DMARC enforcement, if that message fails authentication and basically somebody is spoofing your domain, that message will get an enforcement policy of whatever you have, let's say reject, and gets protected. So you're protecting everybody globally from impersonated emails as your domain, versus SCG is just inbound to your organization. That's the difference.
Perfect, thank you. And then I've got Dan just messaged in, how do you set up BIMI?
All right, getting to the reward. Well, first you got to be at DMARC enforcement. So if you try to use BIMI today without being at DMARC enforcement, you can't the logo won't show up. Now, there are requirements for BIMI. One, you have to have a trademarked logo. So if BIMI is of interest, you got to make sure you have a trademarked logo. That typically takes, with the U.S. Patent Office and all that, months and sometimes a whole year for it to get trademarked. So make sure you have that first. Then after that, like if you're using a solution like ours, we actually have integrations within the solution with partners like Entrust that help create something called a VMC, or a verified mark certificate. And what that is think about it as an SSL certificate, but instead of for your website, this is actually for your logo. So it basically authenticates that you are the owner of your logo. Nobody else can use your logo and all of that. And that we help you with. There's an integration, API integration, all that to make sure that happens within our solution and get you that VMC certificate and host it on our platform. But that's really what you need is first get to DMARC enforcement, make sure you have a trademark logo, apply for the VMC, get the VMC, and then you're pretty much using that logo, or that logo will start showing up in the emails going out as your domain.
Perfect. Thank you. Then we've got another one. Han just messaged in again. He's asking, there are, it looks like several XML parsing services out there. What makes yours more superior than ours?
Well, it's not about so absolutely. There's lots of reporting solutions out there and things like that you can use, and absolutely use them from a reporting perspective. What makes our solution kind of better, right, is the whole service. It's not about just the reporting, because reporting is, from our perspective, is table stakes. It's really about the ability to overcome all the other challenges that you're running into from identifying the sources, authenticating and configuring SPF and DKIM properly, the 10 SPF lookup limit problems that you run into, the forensic reporting that our solution has that other solutions don't. So that's for just, and a lot of other troubleshooting features as well within our solution. But more importantly as well is not just the solution, but you also get our expertise. You get customer success engineer working with you and all that to make sure that everything is set up correctly, authenticating properly, and get you to that DMARC enforcement policy. And not just that, but also keep you there, because we make sure that everything is set up correctly from a notifications, alerting, configuration perspective, so that you almost kind of set it and forget it. And then also our engineers will continue to monitor this on your behalf. So if you guys are kind of resource strapped and things like that, we augment that, or we help you with that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Then are there any other questions? We just answered everything that I had queued up, but just curious if anybody else wants to throw in anything else. Okay. So it looks like we're good. Just so you guys know, I mean, Han, you were asking like what makes ours more superior. Something that we do offer is we of course provide a free trial of our service on the DMARC. If that is something of interest for you, you can actually go ahead and register for that free trial for 14 days just online at that website. But furthermore, if anybody happens to have any questions like about Redshift, about the DMARC, anything like that, here's both Issam and my contact information. We're always happy to help. We didn't want today to be too like, hey, like it's Redshift. It's more about knowledge and understanding DMARC as a whole and what its benefits are. But we would definitely be happy to talk to you about our solutions or even more questions around the DMARC. So just be sure to notate our contact information and we could get back to you. Then if that's it, we will give you guys back some more time in your day.
Great. Thank you all.
Have a great one.